So picture this. You sit down to plan tomorrow's lesson, you open your laptop, stare at the blank screen, and then somehow you end up checking your email.
Right.
Or you reorganize your desk.
Right.
Or you go make tea for, like, the third time in an hour.
Which I am definitely guilty of.
Oh, absolutely. Same here. And you know exactly what needs to be done. The lesson plan is right there in your head. The grading is literally sitting in a neat little pile next to you.
Yeah.
But instead, you just feel completely inexplicably stuck.
Yeah, and the weird part is, the longer you put it off, the heavier the whole task starts to feel.
Exactly. It gets worse the longer you wait. So if that scenario sounds painfully familiar to you, let's get one thing straight immediately. You are not lazy.
Not at all. You're likely just trapped by tasks that feel, too big, too messy, or just overwhelmingly heavy.
Yeah, because procrastination often disguises itself as productive avoidance. You spend 20 minutes looking for the absolute perfect worksheet instead of just starting the actual work.
Right, because it looks productive to your brain. But really, it is just avoidance wearing a nice shirt.
I love that phrase, avoidance wearing a nice shirt. So today, our mission in this deep dive is to figure out why we get stuck before we even begin.
And we are looking at a huge stack of sources today. Everything from behavioral psychology to practical classroom management strategies.
Yeah, to really understand the root cause of this paralysis. And more importantly, we're going to explore how one tiny, almost ridiculously simple concept called the 2-minute rule can completely rewire the way you work.
And specifically the way you teach. Because before we can solve procrastination, we really have to look at the underlying mechanics, right? Like, why does the brain avoid starting in the first place?
Well, that brings us to a foundational concept in psychology, which is the Zygarnik effect.
Yes, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
So back in 1927, there's this Russian psychologist named 𝗵𝗲 𝗭𝗂𝗧. She was working at the University of Berlin, and she noticed something super peculiar at a local cafe.
This is the waiter story, right?
Exactly. She noticed the waiters there could remember these incredibly complex, unpaid orders perfectly, and they weren't even writing them down.
Which is wild. I can't even remember why I walked into the kitchen half the time.
Right. But here is the kicker. The moment the bill was paid and the transaction was complete, the order just vanished from their memory.
Like they couldn't recall it at all.
They couldn't recall a single detail. Once the loop was closed, the data was gone. And that is the core of her discovery. Zygarnik's experiments proved that people have this psychological tendency to remember unfinished or interrupted tasks much, much better than completed ones.
Because when a task is incomplete, your brain perceives it as an unresolved problem.
Spot on. It creates this cognitive tension. It actually holds the task in your active working memory. And neurologically, that unresolved state triggers a low-level stress response.
So your brain is basically nagging you.
Yeah, it's nagging you to finish the task so it can restore its mental equilibrium, and stop releasing all those stress hormones.
It's like having 20 browser tabs open in your brain.
Oh, that is a perfect analogy.
Right, because when your computer's fan starts spinning really loud because you have too many tabs running heavy processes in the background.
Yeah, the whole system slows down.
Exactly. Those unfinished tasks drain your mental RAM. Your brain is just whirring away, overheating, trying to keep track of everything you haven't done yet.
Which completely explains why modern digital platforms deliberately exploit that cognitive tension.
Right, how so?
Well, think about the autoplay feature on Netflix or any streaming service. The next episode starts before the credits even finish rolling on the current one.
Oh, wow. Yeah, they don't even give you a second to process.
Right. They are intentionally creating an unfinished loop that your brain desperately wants to close. Language learning apps do the exact same thing with those streak systems.
Oh, like Duolingo.
Yes. If you break the streak, it feels like an incomplete task. It drives you crazy until you log back in to restore order.
That makes so much sense. And I am thinking about what this means for you, the listener, especially in the context of teaching. Because teaching is a profession made entirely of open browser tabs.
It really is. It never ends.
There is this massive mountain of invisible work, planning, marking, parent emails, creating resources, professional development. It is never truly finished.
Which means the nature of the job is constantly triggering the Zygarnik effect.
And that constant triggering has to cause severe background anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. The Zygarnik effect was originally this evolutionary adaptation meant to help us achieve short-term survival goals. But in a modern classroom setting, with infinite ongoing administrative tasks,
it just leads straight to burnout.
It leads straight to burnout. The sheer volume of unfinished tasks makes the barrier to entry feel massive. So The hardest part isn't actually executing the task.
The hardest part is overcoming the mental friction just to begin.
Exactly.
So now that we understand these unfinished tasks are causing all this immense mental tension, we have to figure out how to trick the brain into starting.
Which brings us to the 2-minute rule.
Yes. And looking through our research stack, there isn't just one monolithic 2-minute rule. There are actually two distinct versions of it in the sources.
Right, and they solve two completely different psychological problems.
Yeah.
Understanding the difference between the two is super crucial for applying them effectively.
So let's break them down. What is version 1?
Version 1 is what we can call the get it done approach.
Yeah.
This is popularized by productivity frameworks like Getting Things Done or GTD by David Allen.
Okay.
The rule is strictly behavioral. If an action takes less than 2 minutes, do it at the exact moment it is defined.
So do not put it on a to-do list.
Exactly. Do not save it for later, just execute it immediately.
Some of the classroom management sources we looked at give great practical examples of this, like quickly cleaning the whiteboard between classes. It takes less than 2 minutes.
Right.
But if you leave it, it becomes this visual reminder of pending task, which just adds to your cognitive load. Or replying to an email that only requires a one-sentence answer.
Yeah. Or handling a brief student query the moment it is asked, rather than telling them to remind you at the end of class.
By handling these microtasks immediately, you prevent them from ever entering that mental queue.
You deny them the chance to trigger the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 effect. Your cognitive load stays light because you aren't storing those tiny obligations in your active working memory.
Okay, but let me push back on this for a second.
Sure.
Because if I spend my entire day constantly reacting to every 2-minute task that pops up, like every email ping, every minor question, every piece of paper handed to me, I'm just going to be doing busy work.
Yeah, you'd never get anything real done.
Exactly. I will never get to the deep, focused work like planning next week's curriculum or actually analyzing assessment data.
And that is a very fair point. That is actually the most common pitfall of this approach. It is often referred to as the $10 an hour work trap.
The $10 an hour work trap. Tell me more about that.
Well, if you fill your most energetic hours reacting to low-leverage $10 tasks, you exhaust your decision-making reserves.
So how do we fix it?
The mechanism to fix this is batching. You still use the 2-minute rule, but you quarantine those tasks into a specific dedicated block of time.
Ah, okay. So I might spend 30 minutes at the end of the day blitzing through a batch of 2-minute emails all at once.
Exactly. You rapidly clear the mental clutter in one focused sprint, and that protects your cognitive space for your highly valuable, deep focus work, your $10,000 work.
Clear the debris efficiently, then build the house.
That's a great way to put it.
All right, so that covers version 1. Now let's shift to version 2. This is the start small approach.
Yes. This is heavily featured in behavioral psychology literature regarding habit formation. Think James Clear in Atomic Habits.
Right. And this version flips the concept entirely.
Completely. The rule here states that when you are starting a new habit or tackling a large, intimidating task, you scale it down to a 2-minute version.
So it has nothing to do with finishing a tiny task.
No, not at all. It is about making the initial step of a massive task so incredibly small that the brain's threat detection system doesn't trigger.
Making it a sort of gateway habit, because, I mean, nobody actually aspires to read just one single page of a book or to do just one push-up.
Right. The point isn't the single page. The point is to master the art of showing up. You have to standardize a habit before you can optimize it.
And the underlying psychology there relies on bypassing the amygdala's resistance, right?
Yes, because when you tell yourself you have to grade 30 essays, your brain perceives a massive energy expenditure and just panics.
It pushes you toward avoidance behaviors, like reorganizing your desk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you say, I just have to grade one paper, well, the perceived energy cost is negligible.
The resistance drops.
Yeah, the resistance drops. You do it. And once you begin, the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 effect actually switches sides.
Wait, really? How?
Well, once the task is partially completed, your brain suddenly wants to keep going to find closure.
Oh, that makes so much sense. I see this with students constantly. If a student's goal is to read a whole chapter, they freeze. But if you change the goal to, hey, just read one paragraph, they start. Or how often do you see a student staring at a blank worksheet complaining that it is too hard?
All the time.
But if you sit with them and just get them to answer the very first question, suddenly their pencil's moving and they finish the whole page.
Because adults operate on the exact same hardware. We just hide our tantrums better.
We really do. So the biological imperative is to conserve energy. By lowering the pressure, you aren't trying to finish the task. You are just manipulating your environment to make it easy enough to begin.
Because progress beats avoidance every single time.
Okay, so I am trying to figure out how to use this gateway idea for the really miserable tasks, like staring at a blank lesson plan.
Yeah, the blank page is terrifying.
It is. Sometimes even telling myself to spend 2 minutes planning feels like a lie because I know it will take an hour.
Well, this is where we can borrow strategies from other content creators. When podcasters or writers face a blank page, they often rely on rigid templates.
Oh, because a blank page requires you to invent both the structure and the content simultaneously.
Right, which is the massive cognitive load. If you use a template, you only have to generate the content.
Actually, I was reading up on how podcasters structure their scripts, and I realized it is the exact same psychological hurdle as writing a lesson plan.
How so?
Well, a podcast needs a hook to grab attention, a value promise to tell the listener what they will learn, main segments for the content, and an outro to wrap up.
Okay.
A lesson plan is identical. The hook is your bell ringer, the value promise is your learning objective, the segments are your activities, and the outro is your exit ticket.
Oh, that's brilliant. So applying the 2-minute rule here means you don't tell yourself, I have to plan tomorrow's lesson.
Right. You scale it down to an action that genuinely takes under 2 minutes.
Like opening the template.
Open the template. Write the lesson title. Choose one activity from a list.
And once the template is open and the title is there, the task is officially incomplete.
And that cognitive tension gently pushes you to fill in the rest of the blanks.
Exactly. And we can scale this concept even smaller for classroom dynamics. One of our sources introduces the 30-second habit.
Okay, 30-second habit. Tell me about that.
The genius of this mechanism is that it must be attached to something you already do habitually. It acts as a trigger.
Oh, like habit stacking.
Yes. The formula is, after I do this habitual task, I will do this new tiny habit.
Give me a practical example of that for a teacher.
So an example would be attaching a new question to an existing routine. Like after I read the instructions on the board, which is the habitual task, I will ask the class, how will you prove that you know this information?
Wow, that takes maybe 10 seconds.
Right.
But if you do it every single day, it forces the students to actually think about how they think. It builds that vital metacognition muscle.
They stop passively waiting for instructions and start actively assessing their own understanding.
It is a micro investment with a massive compounding return on their independence. I love that.
We found another fascinating micro investment that focuses on classroom management and student relationships. It's called the 2x10 strategy.
The 2x10 strategy, how does that work?
The methodology is to spend just 2 minutes a day for 10 consecutive days talking with a student who is struggling or acting out.
2 minutes a day for 10 days.
Exactly. But the critical rule is that you must talk about anything except academics or behavior.
Okay, 2 minutes feels incredibly small in the scope of a whole school day.
It seems small, but the psychology behind it is profound. Struggling students often associate interactions with teachers purely with academic failure or behavioral correction.
Right, so their nervous system is primed for a threat response the second you approach them.
Exactly. But by dedicating an unbroken 2 minutes strictly to getting to know them as a human being, you break that threat response cycle.
Wow.
Over 10 days, it completely rewires the dynamic. It builds foundational trust without overwhelming the teacher's schedule.
It is standardizing the habit of connection. That is incredibly powerful. But, I mean, we do have to acknowledge the reality of the profession here.
Definitely.
What happens when you are having a truly awful day? Like, what happens when you are fundamentally depleted and even 2 minutes feels like climbing Mount Everest?
On those days, behavioral psychology suggests you have to scale the action back even further.
Even smaller than 2 minutes?
Yes. If 2 minutes is too long, make it 30 seconds. Make it 10 seconds. You scale the task back until you reach absolute zero resistance.
Zero resistance.
Yeah. If your goal is to read, and reading one page causes friction, your goal becomes simply opening the book and looking at the first sentence.
Because it is always better to do less than you hoped than to do nothing at all.
Right. Doing nothing reinforces the identity of someone who avoids tasks.
Scale to zero resistance. I want to zoom out for a second and talk about why we hit that wall of resistance in the first place. Because teaching is physically and emotionally draining.
It's exhausting.
And if your energy reserves are empty, your brain will shut down executive function just to conserve calories.
That's biology.
Right. So our sources highlight several science-backed micro habits specifically designed to protect your energy and prevent that burnout from taking root.
And the first of these habits directly addresses the Zeigarnik effect we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
We established that to-do lists cause stress because they are literal inventories of unfinished tasks.
They are anxiety manifested on paper.
Yeah, constantly reminding your brain of unresolved threats. So, to counter this neurological drain, the recommendation is to keep a done list.
A done list. So at the end of the day, instead of agonizing over the 20 things you didn't finish, you write down 3 to 5 things you actually completed.
Exactly.
Like graded the quizzes, sent that parent email, survived 4th period.
Hey, sometimes surviving 4th period is a major accomplishment.
Absolutely. It is like printing a receipt for your self-worth.
And the biological mechanism here is dopamine regulation. When you focus entirely on what is undone, you stay in a state of deficit. But by physically writing down completed tasks, you force your brain to acknowledge a closed loop. This triggers a release of dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation.
So it shifts your neurological state from deficit to surplus.
Exactly. It gives you the chemical momentum to tackle the next day.
To protect that energy even further, there is this fascinating research out of Stanford regarding morning routines. They advocate for a 15-minute tech-free window right after waking up.
Yes. No phone, no email, no social media.
Because when you first wake up, your brain transitions through theta and alpha brainwave states. You are highly suggestible and relaxed.
But when you immediately reach for your phone and open an inbox full of demands or a feed full of bad news,
You instantly hijack your brain's dopamine pathway.
and you spike your cortisol levels, you are artificially throwing your nervous system into a fight-or-flight state before you have even gotten out of bed.
You are basically letting someone else's unfinished tasks dictate your brain chemistry for the rest of the day.
That is a terrible way to start the morning. Giving your brain just 15 minutes to wake up naturally protects that baseline.
Another structural habit we found is how you approach deep work. Time boxing your planning sessions into 45-minute sprints, followed by 10-minute breaks, prevents cognitive fatigue.
Because your brain needs clear boundaries to focus effectively, rather than an endless, open-ended marathon of grading.
Exactly. And we should definitely mention the most deceptively simple habit of all.
Oh, drinking a large glass of water before you sit down to work.
It sounds almost too basic to even mention, but the physiology behind it is super compelling.
It really is. The human brain is roughly 73% water. So even a 2% drop in hydration causes brain tissue to shrink slightly, pulling away from the skull.
Which triggers pain receptors, causing headaches. But more importantly, it reduces cerebral blood flow.
Right. Less blood flow means less oxygen and glucose are being delivered to your prefrontal cortex. And that is the exact part of the brain you need for executive function, decision-making, and focus.
So that brain fog you feel at 3:00 p.m. isn't just fatigue. It is often a literal lack of oxygen reaching your neurons because of dehydration.
And beyond the biology, drinking that water becomes a physical cue. It acts as a ritual that signals to your nervous system that it is time to shift gears and enter a state of focus.
Let's pull all of these threads together. If you are feeling stuck right now, recognize that procrastination isn't a character flaw.
No, not at all. It is the Zeigarnik effect magnifying the weight of all those unstarted, unfinished tasks in your mental browser, just draining your cognitive RAM.
Right. And by utilizing the 2-minute rule, you bypass your brain's natural threat response to large tasks.
You use the get it done method to quickly clear small clutter in batches.
And you use the start small method to master the art of showing up for the heavy lifting. You scale things down to 0 resistance when you are depleted, and you protect your neurological energy with micro habits like the done list, tech-free mornings, and hydration.
You are intentionally turning friction into momentum.
Beautifully said. So here's my challenge to you, listening to this deep dive right now. Think about your own life, your own classroom. What is one teaching task you have been actively avoiding lately? You know the exact one.
Yep, probably just popped into your head.
Now, what is the absolute smallest possible first step you could take toward it? Something that takes less than 2 minutes.
Maybe it is just opening the template.
Maybe it is writing one single sentence of an email. Or maybe it is just finally naming the file instead of leaving it saved as new document 27 on your desktop. We've all been there.
I want to leave you with a final thought today that combines the philosophy of habit formation with the psychology of 𝗵𝗲
Let's hear it.
Every time you perform a 2-minute task, you aren't just getting work done. You are casting a vote for the type of person you want to be. You are providing your brain with hard evidence of your identity.
I love that.
But consider this. If our brains are biologically hardwired to obsess over unfinished tasks, Could we intentionally weaponize this flaw to our advantage?
Wait, how would we do that?
Well, what if you purposefully left a positive habit, like a great book, a creative project, or even a lesson plan you were genuinely excited about, just slightly unfinished at the end of the day?
Oh, wow.
Could you harness that lingering cognitive tension to guarantee that you eagerly pick it back up tomorrow?
Make the brain's bugs work as features. I absolutely love that idea. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Take 2 minutes today, find your smallest step, and just start.